Thank you for joining us today for this joint insurance presentation provided to you by ProLink and the Huntington Society of Canada. My name is Muna Young, and I am a Resource Center Director for the Huntington Society. I'm located in Central Ontario. As we recognize that the topic of insurance can generate a lot of questions, we will provide a question and answer session at the end of this presentation. You will notice a chat box function on your screen where you can type in questions and comments. Due to confidentiality, please keep questions generic. For more personalized questions, please feel free to contact Richard or your local RCD after this presentation. A recording of this presentation will be available in 48 hours. As you can see, we have lots to get through today. We have sent out a modified PDF of this presentation for you to use to take notes. When you receive the link to the video recording of this presentation, you will also receive an insurance fact sheet that HSC and ProLink have developed to help capture the information shared here today. Some of the questions and topics we hope to cover today are: is it too late for my parents to get covered? Who to talk to about getting insurance? Will an insurance company have access to my medical files or genetic tests? Will my family history of HD prevent me from getting life insurance? Should we be thinking about insuring our kids? And we're hoping to answer, this is so confusing, I don't know where to start. Now I would like to take a few moments to introduce our presenter, Richard Stirk. Richard has worked in the insurance industry since 2004. Richard is a husband and father of 4 and describes himself as a bit of a nerd who loves science fiction and collecting comic books. It's been an absolute pleasure to get to know Richard during this collaboration. Richard's wife introduced him to the HD community many years ago, as she is a genetics counselor. Over the years, Richard has been a consistent support to the HD community, providing presentations and guidance on accessing insurance. On a personal level, Richard understands the complexities of having a hereditary disease in his family, as his mother lives with ALS. Thank you, Richard, for taking the time to share your experience and knowledge with us today. I'll hand it over to you, Richard.
Well, thank you very much, Muna. I'm very pleased to be here tonight. It's not every chance you get to speak to so many people about something very important. It's, in a way, I've kind of built my career around this, because for me, my professional satisfaction comes from helping people. And I've done that now it'll be my 19th year this year. And I've enjoyed this part of the business more than anything. So just a little bit about me there. I just, again, wanted to thank you for introducing me, and maybe we can go to the next slide. So I'll give you a little bit about my background and why it's important to consider how to choose an insurance representative. There's two categories. Essentially, you have in-house insurance agents, and then you have independent brokers. Now, I've been both and in between. So I had a 6-year stint with Sun Life where I was only allowed to sell Sun Life products. I had to put Sun Life's interest first. And basically, my selection was more limited in the types of products that I could sell. I had an 11-year stint at Desjardins where I had a little bit more freedom, but I still was a representative of that company. And now I've been with ProLink for 2 years, and I qualify as an insurance broker. So what differentiates a broker from an agent is that we have access to more products. We put the client first. I mean, agents are supposed to as well, but we do put the clients ahead of any other considerations. And we provide confidentiality, we plan out a strategy, and we're there to help you each step of the way. So if you're looking for an insurance representative, just do your homework a little bit, find out who they work for, ask them if they're licensed with more than one company, and just be aware of what they're actually able to do for you. Oh, and it's also worth noting, if you're looking at insurance, please get a human advisor, not an insurance bot. The fact is that if you buy insurance online, they're not going to be able to answer your questions properly. They're there for convenience, but not necessarily the best choice when making an insurance determination. Brokers kind of are able to assist you. They're going to be able to answer all your questions, and they're going to be able to research the market for the best products. So how does an application process work? Well, first of all, you need to contact an insurance broker or a representative. You want to meet with them, and this is something very key. You're going to do what's called a financial needs analysis, and this is required by law, but a good broker will actually help you plan a strategy. I mean, some of the considerations here are your income, your budget, your needs. Going through the process, you'll need to provide medical information and provide a questionnaire. Typically, there will be various aspects of your personal health as well as family history. So once you've gone through that with the broker, and maybe I'll just say one thing here about this, is that when you do an application, your broker will go over the application ahead of time with you. So they're going to read the questions to you. You're going to be aware of what you should know or what's going to be asked of you. So once you review and complete your application, it gets submitted and the underwriting takes place. Once it goes to underwriting, they will be reviewed, and once they have a decision, there could be additional premiums. However, we can make adjustments as we go based on your budget. So once you sign for the policy, once it's approved, you'll make the financial documents available to the company for monthly auto withdrawals. You get your coverage, make sure you put it in a safe place along with any other financial documents. And once the time comes for claims, the insurance brokers will be there to help you. I'll say one advantage I have with working with ProLink is that we work as a team, and we're going to be able to assist you, not just myself, but for example, if I'm on vacation, we have a fully qualified staff that will be able to walk you through any type of need that you have. So some of the types of life insurance, our first one I'd like to talk about is term. It's a little bit, I don't want to say cheap, it is less expensive, it is affordable. You get to select the type of term that you want. So, the shorter the amount of term, the less cost it's going to be. You get to determine that with your broker based on a strategy you've developed through your financial needs analysis. Some common examples are 10 and 20-year term. I'd say those would be the two most common. Although certain companies have a term system where you can actually select the number of years you want. So if you wanted a 17-year term, those are available. So this type of product renews without a medical. So I think this is very important to understand. When you sign up, say, for example, for a 10-term product, it doesn't mean that it expires. It just means that what happens, it renews after 10 years, but at your new age. So if you were 30 when you purchased the plan, the policy is going to renew at age 40, and you're going to be paying 40-year-old rates versus 30-year-old rates. So the premiums are lower, but it has no other special features aside from what we call is a conversion. And we'll talk about that maybe a little bit later. There's no limit to what you can spend this money on. So if you put your spouse or your children as your beneficiary, they're not beholden to submit a claim for what they want to spend the money on. It gets directly deposited into your bank account to use at your own discretion. So the next type of life insurance, this one is called permanent. Most of you will probably be familiar with whole life insurance, but there are a few other types out there as well. Universal life being the second most common. These ones don't increase in price as you go along. They're meant to offer lifetime protection until death. Typically, they calculate the cost up to age 100, but if you make it to 102, they just pay the claim out. So these types of policies often have a cash value associated with them. Not all, but most do. And you can use this for any type of endeavor that you'd like, whether it be helping out your children, maybe paying off some bills or some emergency cash if there's a medical issue. Now, one very important type of permanent insurance that I think is very valuable to know about for this community is a guaranteed issue. Pretty much, I would say 90% of the companies offer some type of guaranteed issue product. So what this means is there's always a potential to be able to buy insurance. Typically, guaranteed issue, though, has a few limitations. Most companies will not offer more than 50,000 of coverage, but that can still be used at your family's discretion or your beneficiary's discretion. Again, there's no increased price, and some of these actually do have a cash value. And it's again going back to the broker slide, is that you want to do your research with the broker to see what's the best choice for you. So the next type of insurance that we're going to talk about are living benefits. Now this is a wider group. It covers, as you can see here, disability, critical illness, long-term care, and then mortgage insurance. So I'd like to start with disability first. What this is designed to do is to protect you while you're working. Essentially, it's an income replacement. It will only cover out 66% of your earned salary. However, that benefit is tax-free, but they base this claim on your ability to perform your job. So if you can work, even if you're sick, disability insurance isn't going to pay out. And one of the common instances here where I see this is if someone has cancer. So they might have to go get treatments, once or twice a month, maybe more. But if they're still able to do their job, they're not going to claim out on a disability plan. Critical illness. Now, this is specifically designed for people in mind who are in the exact same scenario that I just mentioned. So if you do have cancer, you're eligible to put in a claim for critical illness. The idea would be to be a one-time payout, much like life insurance, and kind of the joke we have in the insurance business is that critical illness insurance is actually life insurance because you actually can use it while you're alive. Life insurance actually pays out on death, so it's good for your family, but not really for you. But for critical illness, there's no restrictions on the use, so it goes directly to your bank account. You're going to spend it at your own discretion. You can use it for treatments. You can even use it for renovations. So for example, let's say you had a stroke or you have some other ailment where you need to install mobility equipment. You can spend it on that, and you can use it just to recover, maybe a supplement until your disability policy pays out. Long-term care is a very near and dear insurance to me. I've sold quite a few of these plans. In fact, my mother has one through Sun Life that I was able to set up for her, and we're in the claims process now. So long-term care insurance typically pays out on a cognitive impairment. For example, if you have trouble managing your finances or whatnot, or the loss of 2 activities of daily living. Now, this does overlap with disability. So for example, if you had a stroke, you could qualify for both long-term care and disability. And the great thing is that there's no clawback on any government benefits or any disability benefits you're already receiving. The long-term care policies that are available now, they're a little bit more restrictive on what you can spend your money on, but typically there's no family history questions at all. So if you are in a situation where you have a family member that's been diagnosed, but you have not, you don't need to disclose that. And the idea is that you want something affordable and to give you dignified care. So mortgage insurance are typically sold by financial institutions such as the bank. This would be more called creditor insurance. So if you have a car loan, this would fall under this same sort of category where you'd take the claim to the bank, but typically they look at your medical file after the fact. So for example, if you've ever applied for a mortgage and you've been at the bank and they ask you 5 questions and then they say you qualify for insurance, I'd be very wary of this type of plan. Typically, what we do with a life insurance company is that we would ask a series of questions between 30 to 40 with sub-questions involved, as well as medical evidence, possibly a blood or urine sample as well. They don't do any of that at the bank. So just be very aware of these types of policies. But they do have a variety of coverages such as death, disability, and critical illness. There will be some more information about this type of plan later on, and I encourage you to investigate a little bit further. Group insurance. This is actually very useful while you're working. You don't need to provide any evidence. There's a certain amount that you can get where there's no questions asked. So group insurance can provide critical illness, disability, or life insurance, or all three. Now, some plans offer a conversion option. I mentioned that earlier when we were talking about term insurance. If you have a personally held term insurance policy, you can convert it into a permanent plan. And if you leave a group, conversions for this typically involve your medical benefits, so your dental, your prescription drugs, without any evidence to a new company. You don't have to keep it for the same company. So for example, let's say you have your group benefits through Manulife, and you leave that job and you move on to a new employer or work for yourself. You don't need to convert into a Manulife plan. You can select a variety of companies. Most companies have a guaranteed issue on medical, provided you've been in a plan within the last 60 days. And I'll just comment on this section a little bit. In the insurance industry, there's a term called anti-selection. And the best way I'd say to this is that you can't buy auto insurance after you've already had the crash. You have to buy it ahead of time. And if you've left an employer, you've been paying for your benefits via your employer, and they would qualify you in good faith. So underwriting. Well, this is the part that's the trickiest for most people. It's a process where we verify the information to be able to assess your risk. It's to determine what kind of coverage you can achieve, and it's, like I said, it's likely the most difficult thing people have had to go through in terms of acquiring any type of insurance. So some of the factors are your demographics. There's things that you can't change: your assigned gender at birth, your age at the application, and you can't help if you're predisposed for a genetic condition. So things that don't matter: your sexual orientation or gender identity, your marital status, or your race. So there's certain things they can consider, and there's certain things they cannot. So one of the things that we do, I'll just comment on this quickly, is the Genetic Discrimination Act. We will get into that maybe a little bit later, but this is where a broker can help you walk through this and navigate any type of application. So another factor for underwriting are your lifestyle choices. So you have a dangerous job, for example, a firefighter, or a mountaineer, or anything that would handle explosives. Are you a smoker? So typically a smoker could very easily, if you're middle-aged, double your rates, just like that, maybe even more. Do you have a bad driving record? It doesn't matter about parking tickets or anything like that, but if you've been caught multiple times with excessive speed, that could have an effect on any premiums you would pay for a life insurance application. Do you have any risky hobbies? Do you, for example, parachute or deep sea dive, wrestle alligators? All these types of things can affect, the price, and perhaps even cause what's called an exclusion if you have to make a claim based on any of that. So some of the underwriting outcomes. Ideally, you're going to get what you applied for, so standard rates. So this is when your health and lifestyle, they fall within the norms of the average citizen. Preferred rates, so if you're in really good shape and there's no family history issues, you can qualify automatically for a better rate. The insurance company typically offers this. We normally don't advise people to apply. This has happened about 7 times in my entire career, so it's not always, but I have seen it happen. Declined. So this is another common outcome. Typically what we'd have here is that there's something in the medical history or the family history that just made the application a little bit too risky for the insurance company. But again, this is how brokers are going to help you navigate. I find a lot of people get tripped up on some of the questionnaires and they're not entirely sure how to answer it. A postponement. Now this is somewhere between an approval and a decline. So this might be, for example, if you're waiting for a medical test they might want to see the results of that. I actually had a case recently where they said they wanted to see the pending test, but this was an HD application or a life insurance application with a family history of HD, and he was going to have his genetic test. We got on the phone with Sun Life and we explained that you can't weigh the result in any case. He disclosed he had the family history, so it didn't really matter what the results of that. And so we reminded them, and the application was able to continue. Rated is another common outcome. So this would be if you have extra risk. So for example, if you were a police officer or if you were a firefighter, they might add additional premiums to this. Or if, for example, you had a family history of breast cancer, they could theoretically double or more the cost of a critical illness application, for example. Now, exclusions. This is if you shows here if you have a specific activity, and I think parachuting would be a very common one. If you're an avid parachutist, a life insurance claim may not pay out if you're injured or you die in the practice of that hobby. There's various other exclusions. For example, a former assistant of mine was partially deaf, so with her critical illness plan, it wouldn't pay out if she becomes fully deaf. So with a rated policy, your premiums are higher than average. It still will provide coverage to people. You're not going to be denied the full coverage that you applied for, but again, you'll have to pay a little bit more. Now, this is very important. People that have a family history of HD will often be rated. I would say more often than not. I would say probably 90%. So you don't have to provide any genetic information. They're not allowed to review it. But if you have a parent that has, diagnosed HD, then you have to disclose that. If you had a parent, for example, that was a carrier, you don't necessarily have to disclose that. So some of the exclusions would be high risk employment. So they might say no if you're in the military. For going back to pre-existing conditions with my former assistant who's partially deaf. For medical plans, certain fertility treatments are not covered. Cosmetic surgery and or organ transplants are not often covered. However, they may be covered under organ transplants. Any of these would be covered under your critical illness plan. Sleep disorders, depending on when you applied for your medical insurance, that may or may not be covered. Now, there is a suicide clause in life insurance plans. So what would happen is if you committed suicide within the first 2 years, the policy wouldn't pay out. But they understand people go into these situations and they want to go into good faith with you. So after 2 years, everything's considered, you've made it to the point where if something did come up in your life and that choice was made, they will honor the policy. Now, going back to the section we had on mortgage insurance, what differentiates like a banking institution from a life insurance company is a term called post-claim underwriting. Now, this is one of the things I really don't like because it gives the insurance industry a bad name because people assume they're covered. But what happens is they can go into your medical file and ask questions after you've made the claim, or in the case of death, your family trying to make the claim. There'll be some information shared where you can watch a video that CBC put out a number of years ago. The rules haven't changed since then, but the fact is they're going to look into your history and they're going to say you didn't tell us about this, and they're just going to deny the claim. Now, another thing that really bothers me about this is that the bank's the beneficiary. Let's say you had the life insurance for your mortgage, you're paying the premiums, and the bank's the beneficiary. It doesn't really seem too fair. Again, you're paying your mortgage down, so your coverage is less, but your premiums actually go up every 5 years when you renew your mortgage. So be a buyer beware on any product that has post-claim underwriting. The claim process for post-claim underwriting products is you'd go to your bank or you'd apply through a car loan or a credit card. you'd meet with the professional that's offering you the loan, like a mortgage broker or the loans broker. They don't really look at your medical file. They're not really, they don't really have the time. None of them there are a trained insurance agent, and there's certainly no medical professionals that will be in contact with you during that process. You might have to answer, the average is probably 5, but some questionnaires are up to 10. They usually ask different questions if you're getting disability or critical illness along with the plan, but again, it'll be brief and to the point. Typically, there'll be a family history question or two, and if they find out information later on, there will definitely be a claim denied. It's a quick turnaround because, again, if you can answer no to your 5 questions, you're essentially approved. So you sign your policy, the banks will take care of taking your money, that's for sure. But it is too good to be true, in my opinion. So what happens is at time of claim, they'll look through your file. It could be quite a while before you pass away or you have a health event. And what will happen is they're going to look into your file at that stage and then make their decision. And believe me, that's going to be very stressful because, with a traditional life insurance company, you've already provided the information, and provided you haven't committed fraud or anything like that, it's going to pay out. However, during the post-claim underwriting process, they're going to dig through your medical file, and look for any reason they can to deny the claim. And in fact, less than 10% of claims are paid out. So, genetic testing, how does this all fit in? So the Genetic Non-Discrimination Act will prevent insurance companies from asking about any genetic tests that you've had. They're not allowed to, and essentially any result that shows up, even if you're gene positive, they're actually told to ignore it, according to the Genetics Act. We've had to correct a couple of insurance companies, and again, this is how a broker will help you, because they know the rules. They're going to be able to walk you through the process, and they're there as a buffer between you and the life insurance companies. Now, that's different than if you have a family member that has been diagnosed with a condition. So, for example, if your parent has diagnosed Huntington's disease, you do have to disclose that. You just don't have to disclose your genetic situation. Now, they can also ask you if you're having symptoms, but you do have to acknowledge that. But for example, you don't have to acknowledge if your parent's having symptoms but hasn't been fully diagnosed. I'm getting into the weeds a little bit here on this one, but every family situation is different. But there's a lot of complex factors that go into to that situation, and we can talk more about that in the Q&A. Now, sharing your family history. So these are some of the questions that you should be prepared to answer. So they'll ask about your family medical history. So, especially with critical illness coverage, that's very important. There are going to be a few extra questions. A family history of a disease can increase your chances of having a rating. Now, I did have one client that had 3 first-degree relatives. So her full sister, her mother, and her father all had cancer, but they each had a different type. So one had colon, one had prostate, and one had breast cancer. They actually did not rate her because they consider that more bad luck rather than anything else. Now, some of these questions, I kind of jumped ahead here a little bit, but some of the other factors is how old were they when they were diagnosed, and how old were they if they died. Now, if somebody's over 65, they usually don't look at it too harshly. It's not that big of a deal. However, if someone's around 40, they're going to look at that very carefully, and you can probably expect a rating or an exclusion at that point. Now, should you insure your children? I say 100% yes. So they're usually a generation or two removed from any family history questions because they're not really allowed to ask grandparent questions. For example, they typically focus on the parents. Some companies ask a couple supplementary questions, but typically they don't go past the parents. Now, I jumped ahead a little bit here, so I'll just go back. Two ways really that you can insure your children is you buy a standalone policy, or you can add a child to an existing policy. Insurability. So once you have your child insured, you can add what's called riders to your policy. So for example, if you purchase a life insurance policy, you don't necessarily need a lot for your child, but let's say you buy them a $50,000 permanent plan, but you can add what's called a guaranteed insurability rider to this. As they get older or they have a major event in their life, say they get married, or have children, they're allowed to add additional life insurance to that policy with no medical questions asked. This is very important. This is what I encourage everybody to do. There's other riders you can add as well, and sometimes you can have combo plans where you could add critical illness to it. They usually don't sell disability insurance for children, just they're not working, and long-term care really is only available to people 18 and older. Planning for the future. This is very useful when you're setting up a plan for your child. Premiums are very low, and there will be cash value in most of these plans, and they can use it for education. So for example, later on, if they find out that they are not a carrier and they want to cash out their policy, well, they can use it for their education purposes, or they could even take a loan out against it to go to school. Or let's say they do have some medical concerns, you can actually take a loan against the policy and you can use that to pay off some medical bills, excuse me. So one other important point is that, for example, if the child was ill, you could actually use that money to supplement your own income if you needed to take time off of work. All right, some of the pitfalls when you're applying for insurance. Don't guess at anything. If you're unsure how to answer a question, you definitely need to consult a broker. I've probably said that about 7 times already, but it's very useful to have somebody like myself guide you through the circumstance. I see it all the time where somebody will apply very quickly online or with somebody inexperienced that confuses them or they don't understand the question. Now, one of the other concerns here is, let's say you've been declined before. Well, there's an organization called the Medical Information Bureau, and they record all the results of applications. They don't keep your medical information on file, but they would record whether you've applied for insurance, declined, rated, or decided to go through the application process, but then not take the policy. So these events are all going to be recorded permanently in their system, and all the insurance companies share this information. So you really want to take your time and plan out what you're going to do and how you're going to apply for this, because you don't want declines because they could, the insurance companies will ask why. Now, I've seen this happen many times. We can usually, with the new company, explain them fairly well, but this goes way back to one of the earlier slides about your financial needs analysis. This is an interview that you have with the broker, and the broker assesses the client's needs and concerns. And this is very important to find out if you've made an application in the past, okay? Now, the Medical Information Bureau does not share any genetic test. They don't share if you've had one. They're not really allowed to answer. If you've had a test that comes back negative, you can share that with the insurance company without risk of any other information. God forbid that anybody is subject to 2, hereditary conditions, but it does happen. For example, if you're positive one and negative the other, they will not ask for further information if you decide to share your negative test. All right, here's a little tips checklist that Moon and I put together. All right, make sure you understand the wording of the question you are being asked before you answer. So again, a good broker will go through the application and will review the questions ahead of time just so you understand them. Only answer the questions that you are asked. You don't need to volunteer anything if they haven't asked for it. Some companies ask different questions. Critical illness and disability insurance policies or applications will ask additional information, but if you're just applying for life insurance, you don't need to provide anything more than what they ask. Now, you do have to answer all the questions to the best of your ability. You need to be honest, making sure, Sometimes it could hurt the application or increase your premium, but it's better to be upfront with this, because in the insurance world, there's what's called a incontestability period. So in the first 2 years, any life insurance company can just verify your information on the application. Now, if something happens to you after you made the application, but still within the 2 years, they will honor the policy. But if there's something that was omitted, or not disclosed on purpose, you could be subject of the policy not being paid out, and they might even consider that fraud. This, is a pretty big no-no in the insurance world. That would definitely cancel any policy that you had in place. But again, we'll make sure a good broker will make sure that doesn't happen, because we're going to go through these questions ahead of time. Now, if you have an investigative test, they're going to want to see the results of that test. So you might want to hold off on the application until it comes through, unless it's a genetic test. Don't cancel any genetic tests that you have, because they can't use that information against you anyways. They will not weigh it in terms of your application. Now, if you put the application in and it comes back negative, insurance companies will review your application, and they can actually reduce the price in the future. And again, going back to something I said many times already today, consult with your insurance representative at every opportunity. Ask questions. Make sure you know what's in your medical file, and make sure your broker knows what's in your medical file, so we can give you the right advice, and we can make sure that your needs are met and your goals are met.
And I just wanted to jump back in to share my top 3 takeaways from getting to work with Richard, in hopes that it might help the HD community. So my first one is, the earlier the better. Consider getting insurance coverage for your kids as soon as possible. Take advantage of the lower premiums, the less detailed family and medical history requirements. Number 2, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. Promises of fully guaranteed easy coverage with low premiums always come with conditions that aren't likely to pay out in the end, or not the way you are expecting. And the last one is, talk to a broker. Everyone's situation is unique. One size fits all does not guarantee anything, and really do stay clear of online plans. I wanted to take a minute to share ways that you can connect with us. So Richard is very open to supporting the HD community and accessing insurance. He does not work for the insurance provider. He works for the client. So he has your best interest at heart in navigating this system and making sure that you're understanding the products. The blue QR picture that you're seeing on your screen, if you hold your camera up to that on your cell phone, it will populate a link that you can click on, which will take you right to ProLink's website with a get in contact to Richard sheet. And so that is one way to reach him. If you want to speak to your local RCD, if you've got some questions that you'd rather ask us, then please use the beige QR code the exact same way. That will take you to our family services team list on our website, and it will show you which RCD is assigned to your area in Canada. So before we begin the question and answer portion of this webinar, I wanted to take a few moments to thank Richard for sharing his knowledge and experience with us today. Thank you, Richard. I also want to say a special thank you to the Huntington Society staff educator, Tanya, for her hard work behind the scenes in making this webinar a reality. Thank you, Tanya. This webinar would definitely not have been possible without you.
Yes, I'd like to say thank you to you as well, Mona. You've been great at helping me navigate, your organization, and Tanya as well. It's been a pleasure to work with you both, and I hope we can do some more in the future.
Perfect and great. Tanya, I was just going to welcome you to come on screen so we could start the question and answer period. So for the remainder of the portion of this webinar, we're going to open up the virtual space to hopefully answer some of your more generic questions. And I'm going to leave up this page, so in case people have more personalized questions that they want to ask an RCD or Richard, they can hold their phone up to the screen and get in touch with us right after the webinar.
Right. And I'll just like to make a point that any question that you send to me is confidential. I don't share that. I don't record the information until there's an application that's made. And I didn't make this clear earlier. Insurance companies will only keep your medical information on file for 6 months, and that's basically to help process the application if there's delays. Okay. So again, everything's confidential. You don't even have to tell me your real name if you don't want to. If you just have a general question, I'd be happy to answer it.
Thank you, Richard. Tanya, did you want to start the question and answer period?
Wonderful, great. Yeah, thanks, guys. So we've had some questions. I'll throw the first one out for you. So if someone has been diagnosed, can they get critical illness payout, is the question.
Only if they've had a previous policy. So you cannot apply and expect to be approved if you've already been diagnosed with a critical illness. Now, there's a few exceptions. If you've been cancer-free for 5 years, I know that doesn't necessarily apply to people with HD, but there's a lot of things that if you've been past that, then you can apply. Unfortunately, with HD, it's an ongoing chronic problem, so it's unlikely that you're going to be approved for critical illness, unfortunately.
But if you already have the policy, Richard, so if I already own the policy and then became positive, could I then make a claim?
Absolutely. So there's two ways to claim on a critical illness policy. So a lot of critical illness policies will pay out on loss of independence, so 2 activities of daily living or a cognitive impairment, or the motor neuron disease clause. Most critical illness insurance policies have that in place, so Huntington's disease falls under that category. There is one way to get it. It would have to be through a new employer. So if you are still able to work and you get a job at a company that has offering critical illness insurance on their group plan, that is a possibility, but it all depends on the individual situation.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. That's great. Thank you. Okay, we have another question. So you have a grandparent with HD. Your parent has not been tested and doesn't show any signs of HD. Will you still be considered high risk?
The short answer is no. I recently had a case where some information got into the file incorrectly. That could hurt an application. So this is, again, a good opportunity to discuss this with your broker and find out what's actually in your medical file. But typically, the answer is no. So if your grandparent has been diagnosed, but your parent has not even been tested, you can say no to that question. And you shouldn't actually have any issues being rated, unless there's other medical factors, mind you. I mean, we're all subject to nature, and even if you have a family history, doesn't mean everything else is going to go smooth, unfortunately. But typically, they won't hold that against you, or at least they shouldn't.
Okay, great. Let's see here. So the questions are flying in. If you have health insurance with your work and your parent was diagnosed with HD, after you got your policy, do you have to disclose that your parent has HD?
No, you do not.
Okay. Excellent. Does MIB know of existing policies?
Yes. So anything that you've applied through, they don't record group insurance though. It's only individual insurance.
Okay.
But they're aware of the applications you've made in Canada.
Okay. Let's see here. So we've got Christine says, thank you very much for this session. Her question is about travel insurance for those with HD. Any tips about this, about how you treat this as a pre-existing condition, and if you need to make a claim while traveling?
So again, it goes back to your diagnosis. So if you're not diagnosed, but you do carry the gene, it's not an issue. But if you do have symptoms, that might come up in the application. Now, it's all going to depend on the company that you go through. I'm not a travel insurance expert, I'll just say that out loud, but there is a number of questions. They typically, don't pay out on pre-existing conditions. So if you did have a diagnosis, you could still get travel insurance, just not anything related to Huntington's disease or a pre-existing condition.
Okay. Very good. So we have another here question, multiple question here from Danny. I live in Calgary, Richard. He's wondering if you have the ability to broker in Calgary. He would probably like to get in touch with you.
Sure. Yeah, I'm licensed in 3 provinces, Nova Scotia, Ontario, Alberta. I'm working on my BC license. I usually try to only put in 1 application a month, but you know, I had this discussion with my boss, and he wants me to get licensed across the country. In the meantime, if you do live outside one of those 4 provinces, we do have staff members that I will work with that are licensed in every single province in Canada. So we do have Saskatchewan and Manitoba, Newfoundland, the Maritimes, all represented. Actually, I don't think there's anybody with a Quebec license yet, but I think I'm going to be working on that one as well. So please don't hesitate to send me any questions, though. Typically, these are all of a general nature. So if you live in one of those provinces I'm not licensed in, don't worry, I will be licensed soon, and I can still help you.
Okay, great. I think that that would be a great place for you to start, Danny, is by getting in touch with Richard for the remainder of your questions, since they're a little more of a personal nature. We'll carry on. I have a parent that passed away that was suspected to be HD, but had not been tested. Do you have to disclose that?
So they're going to, if there's some family history questions and there's been no diagnosis, there won't be necessarily any penalty. It's all going to depend on the situation. How old were they? You know, what were the circumstances? You know, there are some questions on the critical illness policies, especially. They will ask if your parents are still living, and you know, if you don't know the answer, you don't have to say. It would be my best offering on that. Okay. So again, it'll take us an assessment just to sort of give you some proper advice, but you know, this is sort of a gray area.
Richard, is it important to sort of note that if there's something written in their medical file that would indicate a suspicion, then that would be something that the insurance company could look at. So if they had something on file with their family doctor that says parent deceased from suspected HD, could an insurance company look at that?
They could, and I think this is what happened to this case. So I would talk to your doctor. We'll organize a conversation between, you know, what to ask your doctor about what's in your file. So this is one of the trickiest things that we do come across. They're not supposed to hold anything against you that's suspected from another generation, but there may be follow-up questions and workaround questions that certain insurance companies will use to find out. So they might ask at what age your parent died again, and that's usually an indicator. So if your parent dropped dead at age 40 from something, unfortunately, there'll be follow-up questions. Now, you can always say you don't know, because you know, if it's suspected, there's no definitive proof. But again, every situation's different. So again, we'll have to navigate this by asking some follow-up questions. Okay, sorry I couldn't be a bit more clear on that, but you know, either way, you would still be able to qualify for a plan. The worst case scenario would be that you would be rated. So that's something we can still work with you on. Now, I just want to address a rating. If you're young and you get a large rating, it doesn't mean that's going to be unaffordable. For example, if you're female and under 25, you know, a $500,000 life insurance term 10 plan might cost you $15 a month. And so even if you had to double or triple that price, it's still within the range of affordability. And once you have that in place, they can't take it away from you. Okay. But again, every situation is different. So I just want to, again, offer the value of a broker to help you navigate that with your doctor.
And given the price of insurance, it's fair to say that an important part of the process is making sure that our community is picking plans that are affordable long term. Because once they cancel a plan, it's harder to then, like, you're not going to get the same premium that you got the first time because you're going to be older and in a different situation.
That's right. But they still can't take it away from you. I'll make a comment here too on what's available for long-term care plans. So the current one that we use is called My Dignity, and there's actually no family history questions. So that's something that's of note. So there's usually something that we can help you with on that end. Um, but I would say, it's best to get something affordable that you're going to keep and not going to be worried about having to pay for in 10 or 15 or 20 years. We'll go over all the rates and the pros and cons of what you can do. It depends really on how much life insurance you need. I mean, if you have a family and a mortgage, you're still going to want a substantial amount of term insurance, until that mortgage is paid off or the family is grown up. So that still might be part of the recommendation, but we might also advise a smaller permanent plan that would pay out on death that could cover some bills or a funeral or something like that.
Okay, thank you. Do we have
Okay,
any other
great.
questions, Tanya?
We do. Can they take insurance away from you if you miss one payment after diagnosis?
Now, if you don't pay your premiums, they will cancel the policy, but every policy has a 31-day grace period. So if you miss a payment, then you can just catch up, no problem. And typically, once it's been lapsed, is what we call it, for a period of time, usually they will ask for medical evidence to have it reinstated. So this actually goes back to the last question. Make sure you get something that is affordable, so you won't miss any payments. Now, you can actually contact your insurance company and make arrangements with them. If you give them, especially during the pandemic, they were very good. They would grant larger grace periods if they had enough notice. And if you're going through a medical situation, they will work with you to make sure the policy won't lapse. We'll guide you through that. Some life insurance plans actually have a payout if it's a terminal illness, that they would pay out a portion of the life insurance proceeds in advance. Now, terminal illnesses are typically sort of defined roughly around 2 years or less before they suspect you might pass away. So if you had a life insurance plan and you're looking into that, that's something that we can do. Now, I know Foresters and Canada Protection Plan have policies like that, so we can select those if that's a concern. So if you can't afford some of the other plans, but you can't afford you can't afford life insurance, which is typically less expensive than the other types, then that's something we can talk about.
Okay. Speaking of
Long-worded
money,
answer. Sorry about that.
that's okay. That's good. Thank you. There was a thank you for that answer. Speaking of money, what are fees for a broker?
We don't charge fees. That's a very good point. How do we get paid? So we get paid on commission. So what happens is the insurance companies calculate what the premium you'd pay for a year, and we would get a percentage of that over the first 12 months, and beyond, usually 40 to 50% approximately of the first annual premium or total premium of that year. Beyond that, then we get a small residual, what they call a trailer, and that pays us a very small percentage, between 2 to 5%, depending on the policy type. But the idea is that this is sort of to keep us invested in your interests. We're required to contact our clients periodically. It doesn't always happen, but best practices would be you're in contact with your client at least every 2 years or so, and sometimes more, especially if there's a lot going on.
Okay. So this is a question that is about a doctor's, about your medical file. So if a family doctor has made a note during a visit that you are gene positive, can that be used against you?
No, it cannot.
Okay. Good answer. Okay, let's look at, can insurance companies look at other family medical files?
No, that goes beyond the scope of privacy. Your family members didn't consent for that, so it's absolutely impossible for them to do that.
Okay. And let's see here. I think we may have caught up with.
We have one question. I have a list of questions that were submitted prior. Why do
Okay.
insurance companies still ask about family history if genetic information is protected?
Well, not all diseases are genetic necessarily, but they want to. But it's to build a profile, and they've always asked these questions. The genetic testing only came in later on, but where it's really supposed to protect you is if you don't have the current diagnosis, why are they going to eliminate for you for something that may never happen, or something that won't happen for many years down the road? Sun Life actually has built already a rate into their life insurance programs where they factor in, if you do have a family history of something, they can still offer you life insurance. Um, the family history questions have always been asked because they're looking for patterns, and that's still allowed because they've always been doing it. So it's a fine line. Um, you know, it's just basically when you're starting out in life, already having been, being denied everything right away, that's very unfair. And I think this is where the Genetic Discrimination Act is really trying to fill that void.
Perfect, thank you. And I think there's a comment that Tanya's got that's popped up.
Yeah, just something that if you wanted to comment on as well, Richard. So on the questions that you'll be asked regarding your family history, the ones that state, has a family member ever died or been diagnosed with HD? You don't have to, the comment here is you do not have to say a grandparent as a family member, correct?
That's correct. So let's go through what counts as a family member. So it's a full sibling, so a sibling that has the same two parents as you, both of your biological parents. Now, if you're adopted, and you don't know your family history, or one of your parents has been adopted and doesn't know their full family history, then that's fine. I've had that happen where the adopted person, doesn't know his true parents, situation, and since he's been raised by his biological parents, anything that's happened to them wouldn't matter. So I hope that answers the question. But we do see cases, you know, every situation I've seen is unique. I have never seen the same case twice. Sometimes the solutions end up being same as another person, but I've never seen a situation that's exactly the same as the last one. That's for sure.
Thank you, Richard. I have one question just in processing some of the information. If I was to only be able to afford one type of insurance, and I was looking at life insurance that pays out to my family when I pass away versus long-term care insurance, which is going to provide care to me should I be uh, gene positive and symptomatic or have any other kind of a need that requires care, what would you recommend as a priority for the HD community?
All right, I'll just say this in advance. So here's my caveat. I don't know your full situation, so this will just be off the cuff here. So if this came up in a textbook, I would say definitely get life insurance because, if you can afford afford life insurance for the rest of your life, it can pay off any medical bills that occur. So, if you had to remortgage the house or do one of these, what do they call them? Oh, the mortgage companies, they kind of give you a reverse mortgage. That's what it's
Reverse
called. So
mortgage.
you have a cash influx. We could look at that as a strategy where, you could buy a substantial amount of life insurance, make sure that you can afford it for the rest of your life, and knowing that pay it would then pay off all the bills. Now, having said that, I'd like to, if the person who asked this question wants us to contact me, I'd like to know a little bit more. Again, what's available to us on the long-term care, I would highly recommend. Again, there's no family history questions and there's no genetics questions on it. Okay, I'll make that material available upon request. But again, going back to my caveat, it's really hard to say anything definitively until we talk. So don't go buy life insurance without talking to me first or another broker first, but we'll see what we can do. Okay.
And the long-term care insurance, just to clarify what that means for the audience, that's more to provide for the services that you need to stay at home for as long as possible, correct?
That's right. So long-term care, the product that's available right now, most of the traditional ones are gone. Some people have grandfathered clauses or they have conversion options on existing current critical illness policies. So if you do want to contact me, we can look to see if you have a critical illness policy, if one of those options is available on your plan. What's available right now, you do expense out, but what it pays for example, would be like equipment in the home, like for mobility, for activities of daily living, transportation to and from hospitals or medical appointments, any individual personalized medical equipment that you need, home care workers, respite care. This is what this can all pay for. You're able to start claiming on this type of plan again when you've lost two of your activities of daily living or a cognitive impairment.
But it doesn't pay for your actual stay in long-term care. So once
That's
you move
correct.
to okay.
So the only product that's available right now is the My Dignity product, and it's designed to keep you in your home as long as possible. And believe me, the money will go pretty quick. It's unfortunate, but that's what's available. Again, though, there's no family history questions. It is affordable, and I can provide some material upon request.
Thank you. Tanya, do you have any more questions that popped up while we were chatting?
Yeah, so if the Genetic Non-Discrimination Act were to change in the future, is there a way to protect yourself now?
Well, get some insurance in place, because once you own it, if the laws and regulations change, you'll be grandfathered in. That happened in 1982. They changed a lot of the rules surrounding those universal life policies that I met. Those were what people were using for the tax-free savings account came into effect to save additional money. But anything that's in place, they can't take away from you, even if the law changes. They keep that all in place. So if you have something now, they can never take it away from you.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. I'm good for right now. Were there any other pre-questions, Muna, that you wanted to?
I'm not sure if this one's being asked, so I'll ask it just for the sake of making sure we covered it. If someone is starting out their career and the company offers life insurance, one, do they need to disclose in that signing up process that they are from an HD family? And is that life insurance good enough? Or should they still be getting additional life insurance?
That's an excellent question. I recall we talked about this actually at one point. So this falls under the group insurance rules. So when you sign up to work for a company and they have a medical plan available, there's what's called no evidence maximums. So what that means is that you can get, it's usually around 2 to 4 times your salary, depending on your employer's deal he made with the insurance company or the plan they put in place. You don't have to answer any questions. Any like medical, dental, for drugs, chiropractor care, all this kind of stuff, you don't have to answer any questions for that. However, if you want supplemental life insurance through your group plan, you will have to provide additional information. Now, if you've already signed up, say you went to work for Bell Canada or something like that, you're going to have your life insurance already in place, your no maximum evidence, get that all sorted out. Make sure you're on the plan. If you want to explore additional insurance coverages through that group policy at that time, then you can provide the medical information, although you're going to be into some of the same pitfalls, but typically, as for applying for an individual plan, but typically it'll just be a decline. There won't be any ratings. It'll just be a yes or no situation through your group plan.
Will they take away my base if I?
No, not at all. No, once you have that in place, they cannot take anything already. So that you already have. So when you're looking into that situation, just make sure you have your no evidence maximum signed up first.
So if I work in a company for a long time before I'm symptomatic and I need to leave work, is it a good idea then to continue holding on to that plan with the no evidence maximum after I leave the company?
Yes. Now, if you're off on disability, typically what will happen is that you can keep your medical plan in place for a while, and often there is an option to convert. It doesn't work with every plan. Again, this is a case-by-case scenario. Some of these things are negotiated when the plan starts. I know in Nova Scotia, if you've worked for them for I forget the time period, but it's around 5 years that you're considered vested. When you retire or go off on disability, you are allowed to convert some life insurance to an individual plan at that
Can
point.
a broker
Okay?
be contacted in these situations to navigate what to do?
Yes. Now, if it's a policy the broker didn't set up, and you're looking for advice, you'll have to put the broker on as a third-party interest. Basically, you would give the broker permission to speak to the insurance company to see what's available for any carryover plans, conversion plans.
So as brokers work on commission, if some of our community members have policies that they're confused about and they're worried, oh my goodness, is this underwriting post or pre, and what have I gotten myself into, and they want to do a consult to sort of review what they have, is that a fee for service, or is that something that brokers offer as just
I
part of their
offer it
service?
for free. I can't speak to all brokers. Some brokers do work on a fee service for this type of thing. But me personally, and likely most don't charge anything. If you need to find out, you can typically find someone to help you. I mean, broker wouldn't get paid on it, so they'd be, they'd be sort of taking their time. But it's not something I would do. I mean, I'm very aware of what goes on in the HD community, and I know there's challenges. I'm happy to help.
Thank you very much, Richard. Tana, do we have any other questions, or are we ready to wrap up?
One last question here. If you were declined for supplemental insurance, for example, extra critical illness insurance through a group plan, will that also register with the MIB?
It shouldn't. You know what? Leave that one with me. I'll find out for sure. I'm gonna write that one down. But it shouldn't necessarily, because again, usually the group plans are separate from individual applications. Because again, it's a yes or no question with group insurance versus you could get ratings. So you could theoretically still get critical illness insurance, but maybe at an increased premium. Whereas the group insurance, it's just, we'll give you this, but we won't give you that. Okay.
How about, for this lady that asked that question, if you want to put another comment in here that you'll either get the answer from your RCD, or if you're going to contact Richard directly, and then we'll make sure that you get the answer that you're looking for.
Thank you.
And other than that, so she'll contact you directly, Richard. We've just had some wonderful thank yous. Great job. And no further questions at this time, guys.
Well, thank you, everybody that's joined in with us today. We so appreciate your willingness to learn along with us. And again, as you can see on the screen, feel free to use the contact information for Richard. He really is an advocate for the HD community and happy to answer your questions. And also, as always, HSC is always here for you. We're committed to this community. So please reach out to your local RCD and they will gladly help you through the process as much as possible. And thank you again to Tanya and to Richard for spending this evening with us.
I'm very glad to be here. And I'll just make one more point. Everything's confidential. So if you do reach out to me, or any qualified broker, anything you tell them, they're not gonna report that. It's a conversation between you and a professional, and we do have your best interests at heart. We want to put a strategy together for you that's actually going to make a difference in your life. Me especially, I know the situation. I know a lot of the challenges that families with HD have. And I've been doing this a long time. So please don't hesitate. I'm not going to turn anybody away.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Moon.
Thank you. With that, we'll say good night, everybody.
Good night.